Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone's well at home. I'm Avril Hepner and I'm from the BDA Scotland. Today, our topic for discussion for our usual BSL Blethers programme is a very important topic because this month it's actually directly linked to men's mental health and well-being. And it's such an important month to acknowledge that. So we've been very lucky that we've two of our guests who have agreed to discuss men, deaf men, well-being and mental health in Scotland. So there you can see in our strapline below what our discussion topic is. This we know is a very sensitive subject, and it may be people or viewers at home maybe want to think about some other support or ask any questions. We will put any information in the comments, but please understand we are not qualified practitioners. What we are going to discuss tonight is the lived experience of our two guests and really just a sharing of information. And really, it's an opportunity for you to see what it's been like for deaf men as well, and if there's been any similarities. And also, we know that this happens to deaf men, and it's okay. But we know there's an issue for men trying to get that opportunity, and we don't want to lose any more men in our community. We want to support and encourage good mental health and good well-being. So tonight, I'd really desperately happy to introduce our first guest, and that's Tauseeb Aslam, and this is his sign name. Welcome.
Hello. Hi. Hello, Avril.
Could you tell us a wee bit about yourself, your sign name, where you're from?
Sure. Hi. My name's Tauseeb Aslam, and I'm from Glasgow. Hiya. Nice to meet you.
Oh, thank you. I'll talk to you a wee bit more in a minute, and I really
Okay.
do appreciate you coming tonight. I'd
Okay.
love to introduce our second guest. It's Will Clark.
Hey. Hi, folks. Hi.
Will, could you introduce yourself, say where you're from, etc.?
Yeah, I'm Will Clark. This is my sign name, and I'm also from Glasgow here in Scotland. Thank you for having me here tonight.
Oh no, the honour is ours. I really appreciate both of you coming tonight because I do know it's a sensitive topic
Hi.
and been a journey for both of you, and I really appreciate it. But I really do think it's important for information like that to be shared with the deaf community so that you can learn from it. So I know it's difficult, but I really do want to let you know that we appreciate it.
Sure.
And learning is all part of the journey. And I am aware that both of you are happy to share your journey and tips and experiences.
Mhm.
Um, so thank you so much for that. So could I start maybe with you, Tauseeb?
Yeah, sure. So I've experienced depression, and it was pretty awful. It wasn't easy. I had very fluctuating mood, so I really had to depend on a lot of support from good friends and family who really got me through it. Um, I'm the father of three children, and my family was very, very supportive. And I felt like I don't know. It was a big challenge for me. It was quite an impact. It's not something that you kind of solve and go back to normal instantly. It's a process. It's on and off, up and down. So you need to confide in friends. You need to take that journey step by step. If you hold it all inside yourself, it just gets worse.
Thank you for that. You know, seeing that you've been through depression and your journey. Oh, thank you, Tauseeb. Well, what about yourself?
Well, about 3 years ago, I had a mental breakdown, and I also attempted suicide. Um, it was a bit unexpected. Well, it wasn't unexpected, really. I suppose I'd been ill for quite a long time. I'd been suffering from depression. I didn't have good mental well-being, but I kept kind of brushing it to one
Mhm.
side, trying to avoid it, and it just built and built and built. And 3 years ago, there was a trigger, and it just went down like a house of cards. So it just happened. I mean, I didn't even know myself what was happening when I was in it, you know. And then later, I found out what it was that had happened to me. Um, it's not easy because it's like a sort of time bomb. You know, if you hold things inside yourself, it just builds. And it just takes a tiny little thing, something work related or some problem in the family or something socially, that will just be a trigger and boom, that's it. And the whole thing just comes tumbling down. Who you are, who you feel you are, all of that has just gone. Um, and then it's a slow rebuild to get that all back.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that with us. It's great to see you here, and been through your journey, or going through your journey, and the work that you've done. But could I ask, both of you, really, when I look at your mental health, when any maybe an instant or something happened, what where did you go for help? Did you really just hold on by yourself? Did you get support? Did you get counselling?
Can I go first with that? One of the difficult things was obviously coronavirus and the lockdown, which intensified things for everyone. And so it was a real challenge to try and do this on Zoom. And not just for me, but for other members of the deaf community. I know it was very, very difficult. So there have been some workshops, groups that have shared tips. Um, and I've tried to kind of plan, going out, walking, by myself, taking time to switch off mentally, just going for a walk. That's a huge help for me. It really does help me. It helps me process. But the whole journey isn't easy. It is a process. You need support. And you need to share with people. I had to learn to share, to get my troubles out, to accept other people getting their troubles out to me. Not necessarily in great depth, but just sharing your troubles with people here and there, saying, I've got a bit of a problem. And just getting that out is incredibly helpful. Like I said before, if you hold things in, it really doesn't help.
So you mentioned earlier on that you went a workshop that
Yeah.
helped. Could you explain a wee bit more about that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it was a deaf workshop, yeah, here in Scotland, and I'm trying to think of the person. It was a suicide prevention person who came to talk to us, and they showed us. It wasn't BSL, but it was really visual. So they would explain, and I would kind of try and adapt it for other deaf members of the group, and kind of get that information across. So it was a kind of translation, I suppose, really. Um, I was kind of adjusting that information visually, right? So like talking about moods, gesturally, yeah, exactly. And so it was really helpful for us to get that input and to share that with each other.
Well, that's wonderful that you had that workshop, so that you could have men from your community all coming in and I suppose supporting each other.
Absolutely.
So my experience was interesting actually, because prior to my mental breakdown, it was a long time prior to that, friends and family had meant they were always I was always encouraging them because they were seemed to having some issues, but actually I'd forgot about myself and that whole
Mm.
journey. I realised that I wasn't having any self-care. So when eventually I had a breakdown, I'd went to the GP. It was an emergency GP appointment, and they referred me to counselling, or rather as an assessment. And I was lucky because it was really quickly. It was within 3 days I
Oh,
got
that's
the
good.
appointment. So anyway, I went to counselling, and I can't even remember now. I think it was 10 weeks or 12 weeks, round about that anyway. and it was a hearing person there. There was no deaf counsellors. It was an interpreter there with the hearing counsellor. And at that time, I really did want a deaf counsellor because I thought a deaf counsellor will understand intuitively the issues, the barriers, and the things that are relevant to me. But I couldn't get that right now. I could get it, but maybe in 3 months' time or 4 months' time. And it was also a budgetary thing. But I needed help now. So I went for the counsellor with an interpreter. And it was really good. It wasn't 100% perfect. But what they did was they helped me prepare if this was to happen again. They gave me sort of tools and skills to think about if I felt the anxiety coming, how I could control my feelings, behaviour. Things like uh, have a distraction. And I remember one of the techniques was try and find 5 yellow things when you feel anxious. So you're looking around your house looking for yellow things.
Distracting
That
you.
in
Mm,
itself is suppressing the anxiety. So
cool.
things like that, wee tips like that. And they were saying, you really can't hold on to this information. You need to open up to friends and family because I've held it for too long that I just exploded. So I would text my friends and talk to them, and it was really useful advice.
Great. I mean, just talking about tips there, when you're saying distract yourself, look for 5 things that are a different color during an anxiety attack to help reduce that. Tauseeb, you had a tip.
Yeah, see, when you were talking about you'd given all the help to other people, I was exactly the same. I was getting just being there for everyone, and then it became I realized, or really it hit me. I looked in the mirror, and I wasn't looking after myself, and I'd forgotten about me. So you're absolutely right. There I was using time and energy for friends. But thankfully, it was a friend that told me I had to stop doing it and I had to think about myself, think about boundaries, think about my own mental health and well-being first, my own life, and make steps to improve that before I can actually help others.
I'd like to ask you both actually, and will you in particular, because you were talking about distraction. Um, can we talk a little bit now about well-being? We've talked a bit about your journey, and there was something interesting that you said that I picked up on because you talked about well-being. Can you give us examples of what you mean by well-being? Feeling good. What do you mean by that, and what makes you feel good?
Well, do you know, most people don't realize that a small change can make a big difference. So, for me, for example, um, waking up in the morning and trying to get up roughly at the same time every morning so that my body clock was registered, have a shower or a bath, and go out once a day. That helped me. It was a very small thing, but it made me feel energized. And also, I felt as if I was part of a routine. And there were sometimes, if you're feeling down, go to the hairdresser. Oh,
Well, your hair looks pretty good, got to
thank
say.
thank you very much. But, again, that was something to make me feel better about myself. And it also helps your self-esteem. You feel fresh, you feel good, you feel good about yourself. Going for a walk, people don't realize that. They think, oh, walking, but it really is good. Walking the fresh air, but it's also giving you that distraction. And you do have peace. You don't have to walk with people. You can walk with yourself and just have your own thoughts. Sometimes take a camera. I mean, that's good for me as well. That's
Yeah,
helped me
so
as
what's
well.
good for you? Yeah. Sorry, were you just going to say
No, no,
something else? Will?
no, no.
No. Tauseeb, so Will's getting his hair cut and taking photographs. What are you doing?
Well, I think I can remember I had a big problem because it was a haircut and the family were telling me to get a haircut because I was really, really down. And I can honestly relate to Will. It totally changed because you let yourself go. So that small change and just looking after yourself really helps. So the thing is, think about how you look, how you feel, anything that makes you feel good. and also encouragement for everybody else is so important.
And can I ask you both? I mean, are men's hairdressers good? I mean, do they make you feel good? Is it a nice experience? I don't know.
Me, I love it. I mean, uh, a shave and a haircut, it's just, it feels good. It's just something about, feeling fresh. Maybe it's a 10 years younger thing. Maybe you look younger if you do it. I don't know. But the point is, it's just the small things that are relevant to you that make you feel better. And that's what's so important. And that's all part of your self care and your self maintenance as well.
Yeah, great. I've got another question to ask you here, folks. Um, so at the moment, we all know the deaf community is very small, and if you're talking about deaf men, that's an even smaller group. So do deaf men have their own spaces, where they can get together, talk to each other? Do you have WhatsApp groups? Do you have spaces where men meet each other, or is that a thing? Um, there are women's Facebook groups, deaf women's Facebook groups, deaf women's health Facebook groups, and so on, where everybody joins. Is there an equivalent for deaf men? Anything like that? Tauseeb?
Most times I'm with deaf international people because there's an open mindedness there about, just being very open about the issues. I mean, I realise that they want to talk to me as well, and it's important to them. And I have so if there's anything sexual or anything before, I was a bit embarrassed, but now I realise it's very important. It's very important for people to get that out. You know, and it's stopping that sort of custom of thinking that these are automatically funny things. But when they realise that I'm fine with it, then they feel comfortable. So then we can start the journey of talking about maybe going to the GP or maybe even talking deeper about their experience. So I think it's important.
You're doing that online?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would always encourage someone to go to someone who's qualified.
So you're doing that online with deaf people. Will, what about you? What's your experience? Oh, when you're talking about safe spaces for men, I think we don't really have any in Scotland. Do you know? I think we should, but men are brought up in society. Boys, you have to be men. Men should be men. You have to just put up and shut up. And I think it's
Mm,
quite toxic
mm.
because you have to wear that armor. You have to be strong the whole time. And that's exhausting. And I think we're really in need of those kinds of safe male spaces where you can talk a bit more openly. You can maybe cry. You can maybe get your feelings out. And within the deaf community in Scotland, no, that's a rare beast. We should have that kind of space, but luckily, I've got very good friends, really good friends. And if I have a problem, I can talk to them. I've got good family as well. My partner, my girlfriend is really good. We can talk. But I do know that a lot of men in Scotland do not have those options. So that is something that we really do need. We really do need a safe space for deaf men.
I mean, I know that you'd mentioned that sometimes you would meet, men together in a cafe or a pub. Is that a good space? Is that ideal?
Well, I think it depends. It's nice to meet in a cafe and have a chat for sure. The pub, a bit less so because it depends on the person and it depends on how mental health is affecting you. It affects everyone differently, and alcohol can be a bit of a trigger. Alcohol is not an antidepressant, it's a depressant, and it can make you feel worse. So drinking can just worsen all of your symptoms. And some people can cope with having a drink when they're down, and others can't and can't judge whether they cope well or not. So I found it much better to meet in a cafe or somewhere where no alcohol's involved. Have a tea, have a coffee, sit down, have a chat, somewhere nice and quiet, and just talk and make sure that there's nice lighting. It's not dark and depressing, somewhere uplifting, somewhere bright. And pubs, I don't know. They tend not to provide that, so not really great.
What about you, Tauseeb? I'm thinking about your culture as well. Well, there was one hearing person that came and they gave us an amazing example. And they were all talking about thinking about your body and thinking about you've got a strong body, but you don't think about your mind. So what's happening is that you're not strong. You're saying I'm a strong person, but once they go to the GP, they then just break down and burst into tears. So I think it's just my view that maybe fathers are teaching boys, come on, you're a big boy, boys don't cry. And in some ways, unintentionally, creating a condition where the boys are bottling it up and then they're looking around them and they're seeing siblings and girls who are crying being comforted. So, it's been very different. So I'm hoping that, in the future, because we're bringing up our children differently, that we're not saying those things. We're not putting this pressure on them. We're saying, come on, let's share your
Yeah,
emotions.
I think, yeah, if I could come back on that as well, because you're talking about being strong. I can remember being told 2, 3 years ago, I can remember it quite clearly. I'm just coming out of breakdown, and I was so ashamed of myself because I thought I was weak. I was so ashamed. And that's a societal thing, that men are brought up and told they have to be strong. And when you have a breakdown, that is a strong thing because you've been strong for too long. You've been holding it and holding
Mhm.
it and holding it for so long that you just collapse. And then once that's gone, um, it takes strength to build yourself up again. So it's actually a strong thing to go through.
That makes total sense. Total sense. Could I ask you, Tosib, again? Remember you told me about the workshop we were on, and you mentioned a triangle thing. Can,
Yeah. Well, do you remember that I said that somebody came to give us a workshop when we talked about suicide prevention, and that workshop there? It wasn't delivered in BSL, so it was very, very visual, rather than in BSL. But one of the things that we took away from that was there is a triangle. I never really thought about this, but what they explained was the three important points of this triangle, and they are mental, so your mental well-being, social, and the third point of that is physical. So mental, social, physical. And it's really important that all of those three things are working together in harmony. If one of those things is out of whack, then that's it. You're going to suffer. So it's really important to have those things working in harmony with each other, all three of those elements.
so, if your mental health wasn't good, would it then maybe affect your physical health, or maybe it's like a chain reaction?
Exactly so. They all work together. Yeah, the three things are interlinked, and if someone's depressed, they're home, they're by themselves, they're opening up a can of beer, nobody's around. So the social aspect of that triangle is missing. And so they're liable to kind of mental health collapse. Yeah.
Makes perfect sense. That's a good tip. Thank you. We've got some questions and some comments coming in already. Are you okay for me
Right.
to ask?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, we've got the first question is in from Erin and it's going to appear on our screen so you can have a wee read. So, do you both feel affected by the stigma of mental health? What can we do to help to reduce or remove the stigma surrounding men's mental health? Well,
Um, yeah, I think that's a good question. Stigma is a kind of, the social attitude, and that's still a big problem. Um, at the moment, I think there's more awareness. People are talking about it more than they used to, but still not everybody, and still not everybody is mentally well. People are suspicious of that. That phrase "you should man up" is still around. So I think it has to start really in schools. I think that's how we reduce the stigma. I think in television, in film, on TV programs, we need to show more examples of this. So we need to spread the awareness. And I think it's most important, really, of all of those things to have it in school. And I think we need to be teaching our kids about mental health and well-being. I think that's vital. I think the younger you can learn about that, the more likely you are to grow up with that as part of your life, as part of your vocabulary. If somebody breaks an arm, they go to the hospital and they get, put in a cast and plastered up and they're all good. And that should be the same kind of sense of awareness and knowledge and understanding of where you get support from if you have mental illness.
That was really important when you mentioned school, because it made me think, imagine going back your time at school, because you were at the same school, and at that time there was no mention
No, nothing
of
at all.
mental health or well-being. And I know it's hard to look back, but it would have been lovely, I think, now. But we've got an opportunity now, in Scotland, maybe within the UK, that mental health will be and well-being are being taught in our schools. And it would be lovely if we could have maybe a deaf person who could come and actually be so absolutely relevant to the deaf children.
And I think that's important because, deaf kids don't really have those kind of role models. So it's always a hearing person who comes along to explain to them. And there's not that same sense of identification and connection, is there? Deaf kids might not think,
Mm.
might not have the same problems as me, whereas a deaf person coming along, and the younger we start this, the better, because that means that kids can grow up knowing that mental well-being is an important part of everyday life. And, hopefully that's something we can pass on to improve the situation for the kids the next generation coming along.
Well, I agree with the Will said. I mean, it's all about education and it's about empathy, and we really have to look to the future. The past is the past now.
And can I link into that? Because you talked about role models, and you talked about kind of mentors and talking to other people. When you needed help, did you seek someone from the deaf community, someone from your culture? How did you go about that?
Okay, well, it's very, very difficult to find an Asian deaf person in Scotland. I could only find one who was in England, and for me, it was just we had the same background. He knew instinctively the cultural issues that we shared: religion, arranged marriages, being deaf. Oh,
You froze a little bit there. You said someone came and
all right.
could you
So
just go back over
yeah,
that?
so this person who came, the qualities they had was understanding of my ethnicity, understanding what it's like to be deaf, understanding about the religious connotations, understanding about arranged marriages. So I felt I was in a safe and confident space to, tell him things.
And you could identify with them, right? One Asian man to another Asian man,
Absolutely.
so it felt comfortable for you. I get that. Yeah. Um, had another question come in, and this is from Joseph Collins, and Joe Collins has a question. So Joe's asking, has the BDA or anybody else, any other organisation set up a men's deaf wellbeing group? I don't know whether he's asking me or whether he's asking you, but I'm going to pass that over to you folks.
I'll be honest, I think we should, because I remember about 2 or 3 years ago, there was talk about setting up a safe space. But the problem for me was I've only got my own experience, and every person out there will have a different experience and a different journey. And I'm not professionally medically trained. So I'm only coming from a lived experience point of view. So I think if the BDA or some other organisation was to set this up and bring in a professional, create the right structure with the right aims and objectives, then you know could be good. I don't think it would be right for me to do it. I think we need someone with that expertise, and I think it's important that it's done right, because mental health for men has been a problem in the past, and it still continues to be one.
Tauseeb, what do you think?
I think 3 or 4 years ago, you're right, there was mental health was set up. I think it was deaf football, because there was a suicide. Someone had committed suicide and was something in Facebook, and I think there was something relevant about a personal story, and that's how it's set up. But they weren't professional. It was just really a group of people,
Mm.
But you're absolutely right. Well, we need someone with skills and with structure and knows how to make this work. We can be in there to encourage.
Well, that's useful. Thank you. And that was a great question, Joe. Thank you. We have another question here, which is from Paul McCusker. And the question is, do NHS Scotland do enough for deaf people, especially men? What are your views on that, folks? Is that a yes or no from either of you?
Well, before, I would have said I'd have praised all the doctors in NHS. And I do that for everything, but I have to be honest, there's not enough services for males. It's always down to funding. And we need to have maybe a ring-fenced amount of funding for men's mental health, but also remember about deaf men's mental health. So I would certainly say there's not enough happening out there.
Tauseeb, what do you think? Well, I think the NHS is grand, like Will, but when you go out and you talk to people, there are lots of people having these kinds of problems. So I think in the future, if the NHS could set up a group, that was a confidential group, a place where people could speak about their experiences, I think that would be timely.
I mean, I'm aware there's many services for hearing people, and hearing people can maybe pick up the phone feeling not great and then afterwards feel fine, but it's not really the same for us. We can't do that. We would have to be online. And if we wanted a support group, we'd have to arrange interpreters and things like that. So there's additional barriers for us to access the services that are already there. So, you know, I think the deaf community would appreciate some support, to make sure that we could do something like that in the future. I remember that when we were talking earlier on, you'd said that when it felt good when you were talking to other men, and it felt, we just felt the same, we could understand it. Did it feel different when you were talking to women?
I don't mind talking to a woman. I talk to women in my family. I'm able to talk to them because they may have had experiences with their husband, and so they can talk to me about that. So I can emotionally offload, as it were, to them. To be honest, I'm comfortable with women more than men because I think men tend to hold back and women don't, they'll open into the conversation with you, whereas men will go, "Oh, come on, let's laugh about it," and they don't take it seriously. Whereas women tend to be much more sympathetic, much more empathetic.
That's useful to know. Well, I've had the same experience. I'm the same as Tauseeb. At the start, a way back when things happened to me, it was the friend that I picked was a female. Because I'll be honest, I was maybe frightened at the time that my male friends would then look down on me and think that there was something wrong, judge me almost. But that's different now. But I didn't know that at the time. But that was my own
Yeah.
perception. But obviously later on, I started to talk to my male friends, but I still have female friends too. And really, I talk to both. Maybe if it was a male issue, I would maybe talk to the males in general, to both.
Interesting. It's good to know that you have that choice, that you can speak to people from any gender. Okay. I'm wondering what commonalities there are in experiences that we see in the deaf community. So, you mentioned anxiety earlier, Will. Are there kind of things that you've found common amongst the deaf community that you've seen?
Well, for me, again, it's all personal, but everything really just depends on so many things. It could be work. So, say for example, you're stressed at work and the stress just becomes too overwhelming. That can become a trigger that sets off your anxiety. Alternatively, it could be maybe a tiny, small disagreement. A mountain out of a molehill again could trigger maybe some sort of emotional aggression, or feeling. It could be something that I film, maybe talking about suicide, can be a trigger. So you can start to think about things like that, and I think you have to accept there's one shoe doesn't fit all. Everybody's different.
Across the deaf community, are there commonalities that you see in the deaf community?
Well, I think we worry that if you confide in someone that the whole community is going to know, like Chinese whispers going everywhere. We don't want that. So the trust is getting that trust. And if it comes out, then that trust is destroyed. So you worry about that. But now I don't bother. I just think to myself, well, you're leaving someone else alone. I relate to my friends and family and
Trust
let
your
everybody else you think what they like. So, as I said, I trust my friends and family, and I just ignore what the outside world's saying.
Great, thank you. Tauseeb, is it different for you in the Asian community? Do you find there are certain things that are common in the Asian community? Well, I think it's about hours, so 8 to 8. I think you have to be very strict about your day, right? Because if you take on too much, it's going to affect your mind. So for me, 3 children, I'm starting work at 9 o'clock. I'm working till 3. I'm going home, and then there's cleaning, there's the domestic stuff. I go to bed. They go to bed at 8 o'clock, and if they're then disturbing my time, I'm going to get angry with that, because where's my relaxation? I need some time to switch off. Because if I'm on the whole time, that's going to be a trigger for me, and I know that I'm going to blow a fuse, and it's going to affect my mental well-being.
Almost like a time out, like a body recharge.
Yeah, I think it's important, that to show my feelings to my children as well. I think it's important to be open. If I'm watching things on the news and things that are happening in reality, I think it's important for them, for their future, to see emotional responses and to see that I'm affected. So I share my emotions with my children. Um, if we talk about bullying, I say, bullying's not nice. And we talk about those things really openly, because I think it's really important for children to have emotional role models.
It's Tauseeb reminded me of something, and it's like, say for a deaf man who's just holding onto all of this information, and they're worried about the fact that it could maybe spread amongst the community, get back to his workplace and cause an incident, and then worrying that people are actually going to judge them. So that really goes back to, remember earlier on we were talking about stigma,
Yep.
and
Yep.
that's a massive big problem, I think, because the deaf community is small. The last thing you want is someone at a deaf organisation say, "Did you hear about so and so?" And then it becomes a trigger for you, and that can have a real detrimental effect on your mental health.
So, Will, I mean, you said, that photography is a release for you, and you're quite professional with your photography now. But the deaf community, respect what you've been putting on Facebook, and you've been very open about your journey and sharing some of those images on Facebook. So how has that been for you?
Interesting. At the start, right? So before I did my first post, I was really nervous. I was anxious. I was worried. I would say, if I've been thinking about sort of work opportunities, thinking about would it spread. I thought maybe I would lose friends. These were all things that were going through my mind.
Uh-huh.
But when I eventually did the post, I get so much positive feedback, and I was so surprised. The amount of support was amazing, and my post really was just talking about working as a successful photographer and filmmaker. But I also, showed on Facebook as having celebrations and everything else. But also, I was able to explain that for years and years and years, I was a performer wearing a mask. But
Uh-huh.
when I was home, that mask was taken off, and I went right downhill, and I just knew that
Mhm.
my way of coping was just sticky taping this mask to my face, you know, and people were thinking that maybe I was being sort of selfish in a sense that, yeah, I was being obsessed about, the career, but it wasn't like that. And it can happen to anyone, regardless of your background, because they're all thinking I was, winning, if you like.
And I think that experience of the mask and kind of the mask slipping and needing to hold the mask is a very common experience, I think. Tauseeb, is that something that you identify with too?
My colleagues at work they were really good. But what we were doing is we were sort of checking in with people. So we knew that everybody was going to say, yeah, I'm fine. So we always followed up with a second question. The fine was just the cultural thing, but
Mm.
was the staff for me were so supportive. My family as well. And it was really important to have that. Our deaf club, we see each other, every 2 weeks, and people were able to recognise, and they would say to me, "How are you doing?" And I would say, "I'm be honest, I'm not feeling great today." So saying you're fine all the time doesn't help the situation. Now that I'm aware, I know that by being honest about how I feel and not holding things in, that I can actually help myself and help others and improve my mental health.
It's great. Will, did you want to say something? Yeah, I think that I'm fine, thumbs up thing, it covers so many things. We're not fine, are we? And yet we still put the thumb up.
But you're right. But what do we say? What or people say? I'm fine. If you get tips, well, how should people maybe construct a question differently, or what would? Could you give us an example of what a good way of getting that information across?
Yeah, go, no, go. Tauseeb, you said.
Go for it.
I think you can sign, you're okay, you're okay. And it's okay to say you're fine, but very often you're not.
But what would be the change in any sign, and if you want to indicate that you're not
I
feeling
think
great?
I think, like Tauseeb says, it's different for everyone. But for me, with family and friends, if I get a text, "How are you?" or something's happening, I think I'm looking for a real conversation. If it's somebody that you know, um, and you're texting them every 2 days or something like, "Are you okay?" It's like, well, what does that mean? Do you know what I mean? It's like really you need to have an exchange for it to be a conversation, right? Just okay, are you okay? I'm fine. It's not a conversation. It doesn't work for me. It might work for some other people and that's fine for them, but it doesn't work for me. I need something a bit more two-way, a bit more give and take.
So maybe asking, so what have you been up to? What's your plans?
Yeah, getting into a conversation, yeah, and being open. Yeah, absolutely.
That's useful to know. That's a good tip. It's a good tip. Let me have a look to see what we've got coming in. And again, to sort of both of you, if you look at currently what's happening just now around the country and with respect to men's mental health, what would be the kind of tools that you would suggest? And I'm using a metaphor, like if you imagine a tool bag, you might use the hammer, might be a good thing to use for a certain situation, but it's not useful in another situation. Is there any tips you could give sort of deaf men, any coping mechanisms or any tools that they could use if they felt the need for it?
Yeah. Um, it does vary. Everyone's an individual. My tip would be try as many things as possible, right? So maybe you want to try counseling, CBT, cognitive behavior therapy. Maybe there's no deaf counselor, so you put that on hold and you wait, until they're available. But I would say, this is my tip: don't do that. Go with the counselor with the interpreter. It'll work just fine. Try it. So do that. Go straight away. Go when you need it. And if you're at home, get up early. Go for a shower. Get a routine. If your routine doesn't work quite well for you, change your routine, try something different, but try and get a routine, right?
Okay.
Establish something for yourself. Get a new hobby. I've just started kayaking. Yeah. Kayaking. I love it. It's really helping me. So there are all kinds of hobbies. You might try something that doesn't work for you, try something else. When you find the thing that works, stick with it. Because mental health isn't something that just kind of comes and then goes. You need to manage it all the time. You need to look after yourself all the time.
I suppose it's part of your physical health as well, getting that exercise. I know that recently, Tauseeb, did you not go on an epic walk somewhere?
Oh, for many years, I've been kind of looking for this, and I'd given up trying. And then somebody in my family said, "Go on, just go for a walk." I love 007, and they said, you can go for this walk, and it's to the location where they filmed Skyfall. There's that sort of
Oh
scene,
yeah,
amazing scene in that
Skyfall,
valley. Yeah, and
amazing.
007 is this fantastic film, and you can drive up there, uh, and I mean, it was just amazing. It was about, I thought it would be, not too far, but it was about 8 hours. Honestly, it was such a challenge for me to get there. We scrambled to this place. And I suddenly just got really, really emotional. I think it was in the scramble and the achievement and the support I was getting. Uh, I, it did something. That success did something. I mean, it didn't cure everything, obviously, but it was a real thing.
So when you got to Skyfall, saw the mountain, climbed up the mountain, felt good, did you instantly feel good?
I just screamed. I mean, I don't know why. It just kind of came out. Yeah.
That makes sense to me. It just means that you're just getting it out.
And there was nobody there, and I just felt so free. I could just release it. It was just amazing for me. Really powerful,
Wow.
really.
But that's good. You know you've got that place, that mountain, that quietness, that freedom, and that's somewhere that
Yeah.
you went there and felt good. That's so good. Well, have you had any sort of similar kind of, I know your photography. I mean, it's just amazing. I know that you relate a lot of your pictures to sort of mental health as well.
Yeah, photography really helps most of the time. Not always, but it helps most of the time. Um, I think if somebody has a hobby of photography, then it's going to be helpful. I'm a professional photographer, so it can be a bit more complex for me. Um, Photo walks, I think, are kind of nice. If you go with a group and you're taking photographs, you've got company, and that can be
Yeah.
really helpful. And the photography can be a distraction, but also a metaphor. Um, and I think filming can help, because filming, is something that I love. It's something I connect to, but it's also my job. So that's a kind of key part of my life. It's something that I really enjoy. It helps me get up in the morning. It gives me that enjoyment. If you're doing something that you're not enjoying. If your work is something you don't enjoy, I think that can be a bit more problematic.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. Well, we're now coming to the winter, the dark nights, dark mornings, post-COVID, what's happening in the country. How are you guys feeling about how do you think these environmental things, how are they affecting you?
For me, I try to avoid kind of the weekend engagements because I need my time. People try to get me to do things at the weekend, but I really need to focus on my own self-care, so I tend to avoid that. For FaceTime and Zooming and things, I kind of do that every day. But I try to make sure I don't lose direction. So that's my concern, that I try and keep focused. I try and limit things. If I get distracted, I try and come back into my flow.
And well, again, does winter cause you a trigger for you?
Oh, I
Just
used to hate
in
winter. I used to hate winter. A few years ago, I learnt to appreciate winter. And now I don't mind it. It's okay. The darkness, when it's dark, 3:30, 4 o'clock, I still struggle with that, if I'm honest. So I do have to adjust for winter. I, kind of still go out with my camera and, my hood up and whatever. But of course, as it gets darker from 3, 4 o'clock onwards, I try and think of something else to do. I still haven't found the thing to do on those dark evenings. Maybe it's film, maybe it's watching TV series, but I'm still in need of something to cover that base. I'm still looking for the thing that's going to work for me.
We have some more questions coming in, and a question coming in from Erin. So it's down there on the screen, so I'll read it out. Erin's asking, what have you both been doing for your male friends with respect to supporting them with their mental health? Have you changed your approach to them regarding mental health since you've actually have got lived experience of it? Has that changed how you think and how you speak to other people?
Um, the workshop really helped me. So the person was qualified, so they're very skilled in explaining the concepts behind it, and that really helped me.
I think for me, I'd mentioned it earlier actually, that before I had my breakdown, I was always encouraging other people to be positive and trying to help them.
Uh-huh.
But when it happened to me, I think, well, I needed care and so the
Yeah,
texting, the friends, was happening. And you're right, I suppose my perspective changed in the sense that I'm more aware of why you do things and what
yeah.
happened and things that maybe I haven't actually shared with people. So I understand that I can't be there for everyone all the time and that I'm a valuable piece of this jigsaw and I have to look after me.
I hope you don't mind me asking you both. When you're talking about exercise and you're talking about hobbies and involvement and chatting with friends and things, what about medication and that side of it? Is that something that you didn't partake of, or is that something you want to avoid, or is that something that you got involved with?
I've never had medication, and that's just me. I just wanted to try it a different way.
Okay, you want to
And
exercise. Okay.
also, I was thinking about, I realised I was able to identify that I was actually just putting in too many hours, and if I made some small changes, it could help. But I think I was definitely trying to avoid any medication.
Why were you trying to avoid it, to see? Oh, I think you've frozen on us now. Oh, you're back. I was just asking, why were you
Mm.
trying to avoid medication, to see?
Um, Let me think. I suppose I was getting support from my family,
Yeah.
so they were helping me, so I didn't really need it.
Will, how about you?
Well, I was offered by the GP some medication and I did refuse it. And one of the reason I can remember the reason is that I'd heard lots of stories from people, and some people were saying that when they took the medication, that they felt that their brain had changed, how they function. They felt slightly numb and that they felt physically different. And I don't know if these are true or not. As I say, I'm not a professional, but I remember that I was worried that taking the
Right.
medication would have actually created a different persona of me and that I would become dependent on them. Or maybe that my depression got to a sort of plateau and it just stayed like that and been numb. But I have been more open minded and I would definitely be open minded in the future now that I've got more information.
Well, thanks for your honesty, folks. I really appreciate that. And it's nearly time for us to finish, but I think we've just got a last question coming in. Um, you know, you've talked about walking and you've talked about kind of keeping yourselves busy and keeping in touch with people. How do you say to people, um, you know, do you ever sort of say, I'm too busy, or do you ever feel like you're not there for someone, or, how does that pan out for you?
Yeah, Afro, I can remember once, it's a difficult topic to discuss, but I can remember there was one person approached me and I was so busy, nothing happened, thank goodness. But it did affect that person because they came to me looking for help and I wasn't there for them. And I did feel guilty and I still feel guilty. I'm honest, I admit to that. But if that person was to do that again to me, I really would think twice and just try my best. But again, we have to go back to the self-care and just watching out for yourself.
Tauseeb, how about you?
For me, I'm just the person who just sort of gets it out. I mean, I'm a kind person. I just want to help people. It's there, and it's really difficult for me as a person to ignore anything.
I'm asking about the other way around, though. What if they come to you?
Yeah, I'll be there.
Mm, when you needed help, did they come for you?
Probably more family and staff were more there. They were
Work
there for
colleagues.
me.
Okay.
Colleagues were amazing, work colleagues.
Okay. Well,
There's something else that I want to add that I can remember there was something that was happening and it had to be happening really quickly. And a friend had asked me to sort of judge, or they were judging me and asking a friend to see, you know, could you sort of talk about this and what's going on? And then someone had said, oh, just man up. And then they just completely went into themselves, and it took them another 4 or 5 years before they could open up. And that's another thing that's out there. This man up, that this expression,
yeah.
or toughen up, is such a dangerous one. We're not built for that.
We should stop using that, right? I see that a lot in the deaf community, and I don't think it helps. I think it's not good.
Yeah, that's something we know now. We just stop it. We've seen it all before. Oh, come on, and everything else.
It's
Uh,
not something I ever say. I won't
Yeah.
say it.
Well, earlier on you'd mentioned about working hours and about. Can you explain about your working hours? What we were talking about?
Oh, yeah, I think if you're working long and heavy hours, you need to take time out. And I think people feel worried about being judged compared to others. Well, so and so is working these hours, but everybody's different, right? Some people can cope with long hours, some people can't. Everybody's body is different, everybody's limits are different. Um, and some people, I think, aren't aware of that. So they'll make immediate comparisons. Oh, well, you're not as good as so and so. So and so is doing the, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. It's comparisons.
unhelpful comparisons are not good. Great,
Exactly.
that's a great thing to to have to have you say. Well, let me just check in. Do you know we've actually reached our time? But before we come off air. Is there anything either of you want to say to our male deaf community out there about mental health, well-being, or any tips or anything maybe you would want to share? Just lastly, Tauseeb.
I think for us, it's important to talk to your friend, talk to your family, don't hold it in. The more you talk about it, the lighter it's going to be.
And for me, I totally agree with Tauseeb. And just to add on from that, that if you see someone, um, don't don't assume things and judge. They could have maybe they could be going through a difficult time. They might be struggling with their own mental health issues. Try and be kind to people. Make that your first and your default position. Don't use language like man up. It isn't helpful. It's not good.
Great. Thank you so much for your advice, for your tips, for sharing your personal journeys and your lived experience with us. Thank you so much.
Very
Really
welcome.
coming today. I think we've all learned a great deal from this session, and I think there'll be a lot of people watching today who've really identified with what you've spoken about. And this is really important, mental health and well-being. And I don't know, I'm sure you know, on Saturday, it's International Men's Day,
Yep.
19th of November. And the theme for this year is raising awareness for men and boys around well-being and around positivity. So hopefully this session and the blether we've had this evening will begin to open some of those doors for the deaf people watching, and we'll begin to talk about these, not just this month, but all of the time.
Totally agree.
Because, this month might be a booster, but this is something that we need to be talking about the whole time and continue to talk about. So thank you so much for your valuable contributions this evening. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Avril. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank